This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
No, it's exactly that. You don't want to put somebody out on television and promote them and give them any kind of exposure. Cut your losses. And there were those in the company that might have had an "I told you so" attitude.
That'd be you.
I wasn't alone. But man, you can't dwell on that shit. You just got to move on.
Hypothetically, what did it sound like when Pat Patterson would say, "I told you so" here?
I told you, fuck him and his goddamn, and you know, and I'll go fuck yourself, douchebag.
So it's interesting to me. Now, let's remember, kids, the contract expires on October 7th. On September 23rd, just 2 weeks prior, on Raw, they do a feature on Raw where they expose Jeff Jarrett and his July 23rd, 1995 concert at the In Your House 2 pay-per-view as being a fake. And now they're bringing in the real Double J, who ended up being, of course, Brian Armstrong, the former roadie who we now know as Road Dogg. This is clearly just to make sure that whatever sort of shine or heat or whatever Jarrett had, you can strip away before he goes to the competition, right?
Yeah, and you got the real Double J. We had the real Double J, Jesse James, the real singer.
How happy was he when his phone rang?
I imagine he was pretty damn happy. You know, he goes from being involved in a major angle to walking out to, I'm sure he was promised a gig at WCW or that, hey, you know, come with me, you'll be taken care of, to all of a sudden not being taken care of. And he's got a family, and all of a sudden you're going, shit, what do I do? And he didn't get any kind of gig or any kind of offer from WCW. We already had the song in the can, already had it recorded. Like to release it, like to try and recoup some of our loss there. So take the real singer and try and make a run for it.
Who would have been the person to reach out and extend the offer at that point? Would that have been JR?
For Road
Dogg?
That probably would have been JJ still at this time.
Okay. I just knew he left sometime in 96, but I wasn't sure exactly what day. I thought it was around September of 96, but I could be wrong. So let's talk about this. Jeff is going to jump to WCW here, and he's going to leave in October of 96, and the deal expires on the 7th. The Observer would report on the 13th that the WWF offered him $300,000 a year to stay, but Jeff turns it down, and there's a general feeling that he's gone. And Meltzer credits Jerry Jarrett for handling the negotiations and smartly using the media to kind of hype up that the contract was expiring and getting word out there that he was negotiating with Titan to play all the leverage and milk as much money as he possibly could out of WCW. Did you have a conversation with Jeff when he left here, or when was the last time you spoke with him at this point?
Last time I spoke with Jeff was the last TV that he had made for us before he left to go to WCW. And last time I talked to him. So
all of the, hey, he's leaving, he's gone, and all that, that's just brought up in a meeting and you guys just know not to include him and that's it? Or do you have to listen to a Vince rant in the process?
We probably had to listen to a few Vince rants in the process, but we didn't have any contact with him. That was the beauty of having, you know, a JJ or a Jim Ross in between and not having to deal with those issues and just having to deal with creative. So we didn't have to deal with a lot of that. We had to deal with the repercussions, and we did have to deal with it, but not as much administrative bullshit.
Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. SaveWithConrad.com. All right, stop the tape. This is interesting. Bruce is saying that he's benefited by having J.J. Dillon and Jim Ross between him as far as the talent issues at the time. He was allowed a buffer because Bruce is in creative. Boy, how times have changed in regards to the way creative was handled back then versus now, and probably even talent relations. Unfortunately, as we're recording this, a lot of bad news has just come down the pike for a lot of folks in the WWE universe. Can you speak about the difference between creative and talent relations and how maybe that's changed in a Cliff Notes version from, here in the mid 90s to now?
Conrad, you're asking me to give something in Cliff Notes version. That just don't jive.
That's probably bad.
No, between now and the 90s, well, number one, everything, and not just the wrestling industry, the music industry, again, you'll hear me reference this a lot, that, back in the 90s, you went through a label, you put out a CD. I mean, just the means of distribution. Back in those days, it was much more close knit. It was a smaller roster. Things were done differently in so many ways. And now it's publicly traded. It's much bigger. You answer to Wall Street. You don't answer to the fans. Vince obviously has to listen to the WWE universe. But if anybody is delusional into thinking, he answers to Wall Street. And so a lot of times when you've got to cut talent, it's just the nature of the beast. And, you have talent relations to do that. JR is one that wore the hat. John Laurinaitis has worn the hat. Bruce, JJ Dillon, you have all those different roles, but it's still, even back in the days when, you had the owner of the territory and the booker, and occasionally you would have an assistant booker. Well, the assistant booker is really talent relations that delivered bad news. And the booker is the creative guy that got to say, hey, man, you drew a hell of a house. You're going to get a hell of a payoff. I'm going to talk to the owner. So it's just really, in my opinion, if this makes sense, Conrad, gotten a little bit bigger, a little bit more glitzy, and a little bit glamour. Obviously, a lot more transparent with the publicly traded. And it's just the evolution of our industry. But at its very core, I don't think much has changed at all. You have your owner / boss, and you got creative, and you got talent relations, and that's the core of the business.
I know we could talk about this all day, and we're going to talk a lot more on My World. It starts on May 4th here on Westwood One, free anywhere you enjoy podcasts. But hypothetically, with all the news coming out in the last 24 hours about people who have been future endeavored, if you will, if this were 10 years ago, would you have been wringing your hands at Impact Wrestling like, oh yeah, it's going to be a good day for me. Here we go.
See, and it's just that supply and demand, and it's a fundamental shift in a lot of ways over the last 24, 48 hours. A lot of folks think that bad news came down their pike, and I can just tell you, they can look back on it and call it one of the best days of their career. That just happens because things get shaken up and shook up, and the folks that are still on the roster, they may be going, whew, I survived. But I can tell you the heat in the oven on them, because they survived, exponentially goes up. And sometimes you take 10 off the roster, that means the finger's going to be pointed and Bruce is going to know this also well. I mean, I think it's really, really good for the industry overall. And I'm really excited to see, and next year at this time on tax day, or tax time, April, our conversations, because I think a lot of fantastic talent were future endeavored, as you say.
And they've got a bright future, and so do we with My World. But at least for now, let's get to Something to Wrestle from 2017 about Jeff Jarrett.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.